everyone. Welcome to Capitol Chat with State Representative Will Morgan. I'm Charlene Briner, and we're talking with Representative Morgan about the 2010 legislative session. I want to talk, Representative Morgan, we've talked a little bit about jobs, we've talked about the budget. I want to talk about your area of expertise, and that is education. Always a priority in a legislative session. We've heard a lot about budget issues for K-12. We've heard conversations about reform. Why don't you fill us in on what happened this session with education reform?
Yeah, absolutely, and there's a lot of hype out there. There's a lot of partisan politics floating around out there, and I think it's important for constituents and citizens to recognize what we did do here in the House of Representatives, Charlene, on behalf of the students of our state. We did pass an education bill here in the House, and it was a very good bill. It had a lot of reform. We made sure that we beefed up teacher and principal evaluations because we know that having good teachers in the classroom is key to student success. We also made sure we maintained and improved high standards for teacher licensure to make sure that folks coming into the classroom were strong and had the preparation they need to be successful. We adopted an alternative licensure program for mid-career professionals to streamline the process by which they can get into the classroom. People who are experienced, you hear the story about the fabled 3M chemist, and they want to give back to the community and become teachers. Well, we found ways to streamline that process while still making sure that they had quality teaching skills. We know they know their chemistry, but we want to make sure they know how to teach it to high school students. We also established an end-of-course assessment for algebra to help beef up our math standards, and we reduced mandates on not only K-12 schools, but also on homeschoolers. So we really addressed a lot of the issues out there on educational reform, on maintaining high standards for students, on maintaining high standards for teachers. And unfortunately, all of that fell by the wayside in some of the partisan bickering at the end of the session. And hopefully, once people take a breath, they'll recognize that there was a lot of good stuff in that bill. And of course, we'll come back next time and try to do more.
Well, and I think that's an important thing because you really laid the groundwork to come back with strong reform package coming into the next session. I want to talk a little bit about something that's gotten a lot of attention, and that is Race to the Top. Certainly in Minnesota, we submitted an application. That didn't go the way that everybody had hoped it would. Tell us about Race to the Top and where we are with that right now.
The United States Department of Education came to Minnesota to meet with states who had failed in their application and to share with them why they had failed. And what we found out from the United States Department of Education was the two states that did receive the Race to the Top funding, Delaware and Tennessee, were singled out because of the efforts of the governors of those states to bring people together, to build consensus with the stakeholders in education, whether it was rural school districts and metropolitan school districts, whether it was teachers and school boards and administrators. The governors went out of their way to bring folks together and agree on a package of reforms that everybody could have consensus on. So we found out that the states that did not get credit were not as successful at doing that, and Minnesota is one of those states. So for all of the talk out there, that finger pointing, it was this group's fault, it was that group's fault, really, we just didn't have a proposal that brought all the stakeholders together. That was the governor's responsibility and the Department of Education's responsibility. We fell short in those areas. But I would say this. I am not going to get too worried about the fact that we aren't going to be getting the Race to the Top money. A question that my constituents always ask me, and I agree with them on, is since when has federal meddling in our local schools ever done us much good? And I think it's a very important thing to remember. What we were talking about here was $175 million that was only going to be here for 4 years, and then was gone. And what would we have to do? What would we have to do to our schools and what Minnesota's values about our schools in order to have access to that short-term money? We know that the federal government already has imposed all kinds of unfunded federal mandates on our local schools. We've worked hard this session and last session to try to reduce the level of mandates on our schools. So I'm not really going to be crying myself to sleep tonight over not getting Race to the Top money. Minnesota is at the top. We, of course, always need to improve, but our ACT scores, our National Assessment for Educational Progress, those are the things that other states want to be like Minnesota in. So I don't think we should be changing what we've been successful at just to get access to some part-time money when we have the full-time headaches that come along with it.
Well, Representative, I feel like Minnesota students are certainly lucky to have a passionate advocate like you. I thank you so much for spending time with Capitol Chat over the course of the 2010 session. We're going to invite you to come back again at the start of 2011.
I look forward to it, Charlene.
And we look forward to joining you again in 2011 for the legislative session. This has been Capitol Chat with State Representative Will Morgan. I'm Charlene Briner, and we'll see you next year.
Bye-bye.